So my diabetes is driving me nuts. My blood sugars go high. I correct that high. Guess what? I go low. Of course, I'm worried about my weight. Don't even get me started on complications.
Hold on. I have just the prescription for you.
Yeah? Doc, this just says be happy.
Yeah, it'll make a huge difference.
I'm sure it would, but I don't think it works that way.
Yeah, you know, the truth is, I don't really know what the prescription for happiness is. But the good news is, our next speaker is going to be talking all about that.
Hello. We're going to be talking about healthy pleasures or life beyond diabetes. Now, this is going to be a little tricky because here we are at a conference on diabetes, and I'm going to try very, very hard not to mention the word diabetes once in my talk as I go forward. And why? And the reason is we don't want the entire focus of your life to be around diabetes. In fact, we'd like it to be the smallest part of living a full and healthy life. So, if by any chance I mention the word diabetes, help me out here and start clapping. So let's just give that a try. So I'm going to be talking, but I'm not going to mention diabetes. Good. Okay, you were able to pick that up. And again, as I go through my talk, anytime I say the word diabetes, I want to hear you clapping. What if I told you that there was a brand new medical treatment, and this treatment had certain indications and evidence of effectiveness that it could improve mood, it could enhance life and work satisfaction, and it reduced overall mortality and risk from heart disease, cancer, other chronic conditions, including one that I will not mention. Reduces stress hormones, boosts certain immune function measures, reduces pain, anxiety, and depression. And if you take this new medical treatment while you're in the hospital, there's evidence you'll get out of the hospital sooner. Now, this is a very safe drug, very rare adverse side effects. Usually the main side effect is improved mood and satisfaction. And dosage and administration, it's readily available, it's inexpensive, and it can be dosed on a PRN or as needed basis, and a very versatile drug. It can be taken by print, tapes, classes on the web, and here's a nice added feature. This drug can be prescribed without a license. You can self-prescribe it. So what if there were a new medical treatment like this? Well, I can tell you that my medical colleagues often find this a difficult pill to swallow. Could there be a medication or treatment so effective and so powerful with few side effects and we're not prescribing it regularly? Well, I'd argue there is. And the generic name of it is Healthy Pleasures, but it comes in a variety of brand names. Sometimes it shows up as sensual pleasures, which would include music, massage, aromatherapy, sexual pleasure, and nature therapy. But there are other pleasures, the pleasures of optimism or positive expectations and a sense of confidence and sense of control. And finally, some of the most powerful pleasures are not ones that focus on ourselves, but are really altruism or selfless pleasures that might come from volunteering or helping other people. Well, that's the territory we're going to take a brief look at. But that's not the way medicine usually operates. I'm a physician, and I can relate to this. Here's a conversation between a doctor and a patient. The doctor says, "There's no improvement. Henry, are you sure you've given up everything that you enjoy?" Well, sometimes I feel like a medical terrorist or a health fascist. That is, somebody comes in and they're really enjoying something, and I'll find some reason that they shouldn't be doing it in terms of their health. Well, a number of years ago, I worked with a psychologist named Robert Ornstein, and we wrote a book called Healthy Pleasures on the health benefits of sensuality, optimism, and altruism. And we asked a very simple question. When we thought of the healthiest, heartiest, most vital people we knew, they didn't focus on their health all the time. In fact, you could go out to dinner with them and the whole conversation wouldn't be how many milligrams of saturated fat are on your plate or their plate. And they enjoyed physical activity, but they didn't check their pulse rate every 15 seconds to make sure that they were fulfilling their prescription and staying in the target zone. In fact, throughout evolution, we evolved to seek out things that are pleasurable because they either increase individual survival or the survival of a family or community group or the species. And so we looked and scoured the literature and developed this hypothesis of healthy pleasures. And we focused on areas of sensuality, altruism, and optimism. And we found that volunteering or shopping or smelling or mindfulness, vacations, happiness, chocolate, imagery, dancing, and so on were things that were quite enjoyable, but also had health benefits. And I'll share just a teeny bit of that evidence with you today. So we'll look at healthy pleasures, and here's my prescription. We'll talk about savoring your senses. We'll talk about practicing happiness. And finally, indulging in altruism. So let's start. For a sensory pleasure to take place, what three things need to be in place? First of all, you need a good stimulus. Let's take a piece of chocolate as an example. Then you need good sense. That is, you have to be able to smell and taste. But you could have all that and pleasure would still not happen. There's a missing ingredient very often, and that is good attention. In other words, for pleasure to actually be enjoyed and savored, somebody has to be home to enjoy that pleasure. And most of the time, we're on automatic pilot. We might taste something that tastes very good, and then the next thing, our mind is off wandering someplace else. For pleasure to happen, somebody has to be home to really savor and enjoy it. Now, I had a personal example of this. I was finishing taking a shower, and I picked up a thick terry cloth towel, and I began to towel myself off, and suddenly I noticed how good that towel felt on my skin. I was going, man, this is fantastic. This feels so good. And then I did a quick calculation. How many showers have I taken in my life? And approximately 10,000 showers. And the question popped into my mind, where was I for 9,999 showers? That is, somebody had to be home, and finally I was home, to actually enjoy that feeling of the towel on my skin. And so it's simple daily pleasures like this of attending to the things that happen around us and savoring them. So here's an example. I'd like you to make friends with your towel. That is, give yourself the gift after you get out of a shower of maybe 30 seconds just to really focus on how good that towel feels. Get intimate with your towel. So here's me, a picture of me before making friends with my towel. Here's me after making friends with my towel. And that's my wife because she also enjoys this little sensory exercise. Our sense of touch is extremely important for healthy growth and development. And it turned out that psychologist Sidney Girard got a grant to roam the cafes of the world and observe how often couples touched each other in these cafes. And so I'd like to ask you, he found 180 touches per hour in one country. And what country is that likely to be? Let me narrow it down. Is it San Juan, Puerto Rico? Is it Paris, France? Is it Gainesville, Florida? Or London, England? What's your guess? Here's the data. San Juan, Puerto Rico, 180 touches per hour by the couple. Paris, France, still a very respectable 110 touches per hour. And that's what could be observed above the table. Gainesville, Florida, we're down to 2 touches per hour. And finally, in London, England, 0 touches per hour. Now, this wouldn't be a problem, except touch is actually not only pleasurable, It's a vital nutrient. And one of the examples is massage therapy. And that is, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, but Tiffany Fields and others at the Touch Research Institute at the University of Miami have done randomized trials of using massage therapy. They started with infants, preterm infants, and they would just gently stroke and massage them, and they found out that they got out of the hospital sooner, had healthier growth and development, put on weight faster. They've applied this in pregnancy and childbirth, in asthmatic children, adolescents, post-traumatic stress disorder, eating disorders, migraine. It's not a cure for all of these conditions, but it improves measurably the quality of life. Now, is it okay if I talk about sex for a moment while we're talking about sensory pleasures? What do you think? Oh, good. All right. Well, there was a study that came out in the British Medical Journal that showed the risk of death in men who had sex twice a week was more than half that of men who had sex less than once a month. And that was after adjusting for things like age, social class, smoking, blood pressure, or pre-existing diseases. So it wasn't just the sick men weren't having sex. Now, I got very excited when I came across this study. I downloaded the article and I emailed it to my wife. I couldn't wait to get home. I got home and I said to her, "Did you check your email?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Did you read the attachment I put in the email?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Did you look at the methods section of that study? Twice a week at least, and half the mortality." I said, "Do you realize you can save my life?" She looked at me and she said, "I think you're going to die." Well, it turns out that enjoying sexual activity, there's a lot of evidence right now, either enjoying it alone, by yourself, or with a partner, can actually improve health outcomes. Now, when I sent this slide to our AV department, I had a pretty wonderful graphic, and this is the way it came back. And then finally, I implored them to do something better, and that's the best they could do. So what about others savoring our other senses, like looking at nature? Turns out we evolved to look at nature. And when we do, we have more positive feelings, less negative emotion, lower arousal, and if we're stressed, we recover more quickly from the stress. Well, actually, this plays out for patients going in for surgery. They looked at patients going into the same hospital for the same type of surgical procedures, and one looks out their window and they see a lovely wooded tree scene. And the other are admitted for the same procedure, same hospital, but they looked out on a brown brick wall. Those who looked out on nature had less distress, they required less pain medication, and they were discharged from the hospital as much as 1 day sooner. We evolved to look at nature and to expose ourselves to nature. And this is one of the first generations of children and adults who are experiencing nature deficit disorder. Now, I'm interested also in a Greek study that was done in looking at men who had taken a siesta and comparing them to controls. These men who had a heart attack were 30 to 50% less likely if they had taken a siesta, but it was a small study. So they extended it now to 24,000 people, followed over 6 years. Taking just an occasional nap reduced heart disease risk by 12%, frequent naps 37% reduction. Now, my specialty in medicine is preventive medicine, and I'm actually pretty excited right now because as you're watching or listening to this video, if you doze off, I am not going to be offended because I'm actually practicing preventive medicine by helping you reduce your risk of a heart attack. So we can save our senses, but we can also practice happiness as a healthy pleasure, and particularly focusing on moods and moments. It turns out the happier people seem to be healthier. Those answering the question in the last 4 weeks Have you been a happy person? All things considered, how satisfied are you with your life? People with higher happiness and life satisfaction 2 years later reported 50% less long-term health conditions. So let me give you an example. We actually experience the world through a set of emotional filters and experiencing it very different. So for example, let's say you're walking through a shopping mall and you look down on the ground and you see a dollar bill and you pick it up and you go, I look around, there's no one to give it to. So you say it's my lucky day and you put it in your pocket. That changes your mood and it also changes your emotional filters. Would you think that finding a single dollar bill would make you think that nuclear war is less likely? Would it make you happier with your spouse or significant other? And would it cause you to buy the same brand of refrigerator because you think it's rock solid? Well, it turns out we don't experience reality around us directly. It goes through a set of emotional filters. And when we're in a good mood, something lucky happened, something good happened, it changes our entire perception of risk around us and how we perceive ourselves. Now, the problem is it doesn't last long. It's fairly fleeting. So you have to fill your life with these small, tiny pleasures that boost your mood. For example, studies have been done with heart attack patients, and they were prescribed not just medications, but watching a 30-minute humorous videos. They had fewer irregular rhythms, less blood pressure, less medication, and in this small study, even 1/5 the rate of recurrent heart attack. So let's look at some love tips from kids for a moment. What do most people do on a date? Well, Mike, age 9, says on the first date, they tell each other a bunch of lies, and that usually gets them interested enough for a second date. Or, concerning why love happens between two particular people, I think you're supposed to get shot with an arrow or something, but the rest isn't supposed to be as painful, says Harlan, age 8. And finally, how can you tell if a stranger if two people are married? And you might have to guess based on whether they seem to be yelling at the same kids, says Derek. Now, if in hearing those humorous love tips from kids, you're laughing, you're smiling, you're in a slightly better mood, nuclear war will seem less likely, you're happier with your spouse and significant other, and you think that refrigerator is the best brand on earth. But remember, it doesn't last long. We have not only emotional filters, but we have cognitive or mental filters. That is, as I'm giving this little talk to you now, there are talks going on all around the world listening to me. That is, while you're listening to me, you're talking to yourself almost constantly. You're saying, oh, this is kind of interesting, and I wonder whether I can get the data on that slide, or, oh, I already know all this, and yet it takes a scientist to prove this. It turns out I get an hour with you, or a half hour. You are with you 24/7 telling yourself these stories. And those who tell themselves more positive, empowering stories, or optimistic stories, are going to be healthier. So a quick story. I was traveling with my son. We were in a very expensive restaurant. He's about age 8. I look at the menu. I'm outraged at how expensive it is. He says, I'll order a bowl of clam chowder. I quickly check the menu again. Clam chowder, $12.95. It was the cheapest thing on the menu, so I ordered it as well. Moments later, 2 bowls of clam chowder come to the table. I take 1 spoonful. It's gritty. It has sand in it. They cannot even wash the clams, and they have the nerve of charging me $12.95. Waiter, come over here, and in fact, bring the manager. During this emotional arousal, my coronary arteries are probably going into spasm. My GI tract is shutting down. Meanwhile, I'm angry as can be. I look over at my son. He's sitting there smiling, eating his clam chowder. And I said, what's going on? And he said, Dad, you know, this clam chowder is so fresh, you can still taste the sea in it. That is, it's the same bowl of clam chowder. I'm having a coronary artery attack and a stroke. He's having the time of his life. So the question I put to you is, what are the stories you tell yourself the next time you get a bowl of clam chowder? You have the ability to change that story. And in changing it, change your whole physiological reaction. But all healthy pleasures aren't just about savoring your senses or practicing happiness. It turns out, when we spoke with people and looked at the scientific literature, some of the most pleasurable things in people's lives are when they forget about themselves and focus on caring for or about something outside themselves. Connecting with or caring for something, whether it be other people, pets, the planet, religion, something that gets the focus off of ourselves. There's evidence that it enhances our health and survival. Those are selfless pleasures. So, for example, we all know that receiving social support from somebody else is really important to improving health and reducing mortality. But studies are now suggesting that actually giving social support to somebody else decreases mortality risk even more. That is, it's sometimes better giving than receiving. And this is an example where you get the focus off yourself, your own limitations, your own problems, and focus on helping someone or something outside yourself. For example, a study was done on spending money. They gave $5 or $10 to a group of people, and the only requirement was they had to spend it in the next 24 hours, and they had to record what they spent it on and how it made them feel. So here's a cartoon based on the study. A new study says money can buy happiness if it's spent on someone else, then let's go to the mall and make you really happy. That is, the people who actually spent the money on someone else had a greater level of happiness than those who spent it on themselves. And pets make a difference, caring for pets. You know, when I went to medical school, pets were bad news. You know, you could get a dog bite, you could get cat scratch fever. If you had a parrot, you could get a rare infectious disease called psittacosis. With all that I learned in medical school about how bad pets were, it's a wonder anybody would have a pet. And yet people do. But looking at the other side of it, there was a study done that showed in the year following a heart attack, pet owners had 1/5 the rate of recurrent heart attack. And I know you're thinking, oh, sure, you have a dog, you go out, walk the dog, you get exercise. It did not matter what type of pet you had. It could be fish. You don't get a lot of exercise with fish. It could be a pet python. I had a pet python. I didn't get much exercise, but I did get a lot of hugs. When you think about our caring for someone or something outside of ourselves, like a pet, it turns out, where else could you get such non-judgmental acceptance but from our pets? So another way to indulge in altruism to improve health is to practice gratitude. And Emmons, a psychologist up at the University of California, Davis, and his colleagues had done some of the early studies where they did a very simple exercise. They asked people at the end of the day to write down 3 to 5 things that happened in the last 24 hours that they were grateful for. And they would make the list. Now, here's the interesting thing. I tried this exercise. And you know, when you're sitting down, writing down those things you're grateful for, well, it turns out that it not only boosts your mood in that moment, because you're thinking about those wonderful things, but for the next 24 hours, it boosts your mood. How does it do that? Well, if I know I'm going to face a blank sheet of paper tonight and put down 3 to 5 things I'm grateful for, I'm already starting to pay attention. My antennae are up. I'm filtering my life experience, looking, seeking out, and noticing the things that I'm grateful for. So you're priming yourself to notice those very small things that can boost your mood and improve your happiness. Now, if you find on your list that there are people that you're grateful for, write a note of thanks and gratitude to them, or communicate directly and explicitly to them. It turns out when they survey people at the end of life, one of the biggest regrets they have is they didn't let the people around them know how special they were to you. That is the biggest regret, was not letting them know how grateful you are that they're in your life. So, what's my pleasure prescription for you? Well, it's simple. Spend money on others, play with your pets, savor a bowl of clam chowder, watch funny movies, nature programs, find $1, write thank you notes, get a massage, make friends with your towel, and I'll give you 6 refills on that. Now, if you do all those things, it will help you enjoy and relish life and may even reduce your burden of having diabetes. Oh, did I hear you applaud? Thank you very much.